Welcome to Thrive, the podcast. Welcome to Thrive, the podcast, where I'll be talking with guests who've created extraordinary results in business and life through listening to and following through on their intuition in the face of logic, reason, and rationale, to demonstrate why your inner navigation is the most important advisor you'll ever meet. No matter what you've been through, faced, feared, or run from, Thrive is here to uplift you and give you the courage and fortitude to face your future, even when you don't feel fearless. I'm your host, Elizabeth Adams. Throughout my 20s and some of my 30s, I operated from a place of workaholism, believing that when I reached success, all would be well in my world. Coming home to myself was a journey that began with a series of synchronicities that led me to learning how to tap my intuition and ultimately gave me the tools to live a far more rewarding life. Since then, I've been helping my clients to thrive. No matter what you're up against, grief, depression, unfavorable circumstances of any kind are only ever a starting point on the way to realizing the life you were born to live. The power really is within you, and my intention with this podcast is to enable you to unlock it. Quality connection is underpinned by quality communication. For this, it isn't only about expressing and speaking, it's also about our ability to listen and hear beyond the words spoken to impact and influence the energy from which those words arise in ways that enhance life for all concerned. NVC, nonviolent communication, is a modality, a language designed to diffuse conflict, misunderstandings, and get to the heart of what truly matters for everyone. Marry this modality with a woman who has honed her felt senses and intuition, and you have Shari Elle, founder of the Communication Group Australia, leadership skills for purpose-driven change makers. For more than 20 years, the gorgeous Shari has been working with organizations and individuals to bridge challenges to experience the rewards that come from communicating in ways that foster quality connection. In my own life and work, the principles of NVC have empowered me to deepen my skills and create more love, respect, and understanding as a foundation that others can depend on to enable a deeper connection within themselves and with those around them. To find out more about Shari's work within corporates and her individual programs, visit the show notes. To inquire about my team facilitation work that focuses on unleashing your collective innovation and productivity as a team, also visit the show notes. In the meantime, enjoy this episode and please subscribe and share. Thanks so much for listening. Welcome, Shari, to Thrive, the podcast.
Hey,
It's
Liz.
really lovely to have you.
So much fun. I love coming together with you and playing with you, and what a better way. There's no better way of working, really, is there?
You go, except in person. I mean, we're miles away. You're over in Australia. I'm here in the UK. I wanted to invite you, though, because, you know, one of the specialties in your life purpose really is all around connection and communication. And this is an area that, you know, I feel so drawn to explore with you. And also, I know the value of it. And I know just how difficult this is for a lot of us. Communication in relationship, communication in business. There's so much that goes left unsaid. You know, it's like it's this huge aspect of our lives that we often spend very little time, resource, energy, attention, and finance to really look at. And yet when we when we do give space for this, we discover so much about ourselves and one another. It's so rich. It's such a fertile ground for intimacy and connection. And there's so much missed opportunity in this space of communication and connection. I also know in my own experience that the closer we are to people, the harder it can be to communicate. You know, the higher the stakes are about what we might lose if we truly reveal ourselves and express ourselves. And there's also nuances to how we listen. You know, how we receive something when someone else expresses something to us, how we hear them is, you know, it's not just critical, but it just has, I don't even know if I know the words. So I'm going to hand over to you because I'm sure you have the words on this.
I mean, I would use the word it's essential, but not just from a place of what we should, but like from the place of our essence, right?
Mm,
It's
mm,
essential. It's like, how can you and I be, or anyone be in relationship if we don't actually hear beyond the words to what is essential that this person is saying,
mm.
right? Such a different way of listening.
Yeah, I just want to caveat, you know, when we say relationship, we're talking about all interpersonal connection and dynamic. It's not just,
Absolutely.
we're not talking in context of marriage or, you know, this is every relationship that we
Every
have with
relationship.
another
But
living
but the
person.
other but the other part of this is like, we think that then when we go into the workplace or we stand in our leadership or whatever, that we now need to become professional. And as professional, we stop becoming human, because there's a set way that we have to behave. There's set outcomes we have to achieve. So it's like we actually leave, to some extent, a lot of us leave ourselves behind and just
Mm.
move into this automatic, the ways that our culture, whatever organization that we're with, or the ways that we're expected to be.
So
And
that,
and we
yeah, sorry.
and we stop actually meeting each other as human beings.
Mm.
And so it doesn't really matter whether we're talking about organizations or we're talking about um, uh, intimate relationships. It's all the same thing.
Yeah, there's a masking though. I especially feel it in the professional realm. You know, it's almost like you can feel the shield is up and you can't get a read on someone in a way because their communication is coming from the rational head and it's like head against head and there's no feeling in it. And that's an area that, um, you know, well, there's so much more that's possible
Yeah.
if we
Yeah.
could let down the mask. What is it, do you think, that um, people are afraid of?
Mhm. I think we're afraid of a lot of things, and I think it's different for every person too, what we're afraid of. But I think, well, I know certainly for me, there are a set of criteria that I have that if I fulfill these criteria, then I am acceptable. And so, for example, one of those criteria for me, that it's still, I'm very aware of it, but it's still, it's still got its shadows that play through, is that I really like to be seen as intelligent and aware. Generous is another one, right? Um, uh, so whenever anything starts to threaten this way that I really enjoy to be perceived, and that is safe for me to be perceived. And also within an organization, it's successful for me to be perceived in these ways, or my idea is that it's successful. Yeah, I'm going to defend that. And so, I really want to, I heard a statistic for organizations. It's something like 35% or 40% of people's efforts in the workplace, and this is an actual study that was done, go into defending our image. What a waste of energy is that? It's huge.
Yeah, that's
It's
massive. Yeah, yeah,
huge.
yeah.
And that doesn't take into account the missed opportunities, because every time we are not connecting as humans, our trust decreases. So when I say human,
Oh, wow. Right there. Every time we're not connecting with one another, and really to connect, it's not an intellectual thing most of the time. It's heart to heart, right? It's a feeling. And when I'm saying feeling, I'm not talking about emotion. I'm talking about a felt. If we feel it in the body, it's visceral.
it's visceral. It's visceral. And, we communicate in energy. Energy is actually, I say energy, and I'm not talking emotionality, but but our sense of someone, our sense of, are they being really straight with me right now? You can feel that different in your body to if someone is trying to put on a front. It feels
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. Somebody said it recently. I had another guest, Judy Van Niekerk, and she puts it this way. She said, our first language is awareness. Right? It's the awareness of that energy.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. 1,000,000%. You look at animals.
Mm.
Animals just are picking up on this all the time. Babies are picking up
Yeah.
on this all the time. The first thing you can do with your little one, if they're upset, is check yourself. Am I
Absolutely.
stressed? Am I uptight? Am I, racing?
Yeah.
What's going on in me?
Yeah.
And the more I calm, the more that actually that you will see that they generally just also calm.
Yeah, it's a sense of presence. I notice it with animals, when I'm truly very present, they just gravitate to me. I've been followed on my walks through Richmond Park by deer who just want to be literally beside me because they can
Oh,
feel a level of presence, not
yeah,
a level of, it's like our mental capacity. It has a frequency, quite a disturbed frequency. I think of it as the difference between the intellect of the head and the intelligence of the body.
totally.
We need the integration, to draw on our thoughts as the servant rather than the master. But so often we have it the other way around.
Yeah, there's
Um,
massive information that
mm,
is there within our felt
mm,
sense. I'm
yeah.
not talking, and also in our emotions, yes, but
Mm.
within our felt sense, it's yeah, it's massive. Yeah.
You've been the leader of this for Australia as an entire country for several decades now. You brought this form of communication into corporations, and you've been training thousands of people every year in communication. Individuals who've chosen to explore this with you. What initiated that in your life? What was going on in your world that made you think, oh, hold on a minute, communication you know, is my purpose here? What was that?
Yeah, hilarious. Um, well, I never thought that. So so I've been teaching nonviolent communication now for the last 23 years, so a long time. And before that, though, I had an organization that worked with organizations, and we consulted with their sales teams, and we taught their sales teams, and we taught their general managers and so on. And communication was a huge part of what we taught. And I thought I was a pretty good communicator. Like, I think that that's true for nearly everyone. Like, we think, for most people, that we think we're pretty good we think that we're pretty good communicators, right? We've been speaking since we were 2, right? So we think we're pretty good communicators and we know how to use words. And I had a business partner at the time, and she had some family challenges, and back then there was no such thing as Google, and she came across, or she went searching. She was really, really great at searching for things, and she came across somehow Marshall Rosenberg and nonviolent communication. I think it was even before the book was out, but it was about that time. And she reached out, she rang them in the US, because of course, anyway, she rang them. And she said, "Is this another way that we should talk?" And they said, "Absolutely not." And she went, "Okay, I'm interested." And she said, "Well, there's someone who's coming out from the UK, and they're coming out in a couple of months. Would you like to be part of organizing her visit?" And so by default, like, she just became part of the organizing team, but by default, because I was her business partner, I just got in the slipstream of all of that. And so I had a free ticket. I had no idea what it was. I certainly didn't think that I needed it. And back then I was meditating, I was doing yoga, I was sitting with enlightened beings, really beautiful, amazing beings. And I thought I had my shit together. And then all of a sudden I attended this training, and I realized a few things. I realized, first of all, that I had no words at all for my inner world. Like, I had like 4 feeling words, like mad, sad, glad, bad, and that was it. And I had no idea that I even had needs, let alone what they were.
Wow. Yeah. So relate to that one. Not even that it was actually shameful to have needs. Yeah.
Of course. Of
Yeah.
course. And particularly if you're spiritual. I mean, if you're spiritual, well, you should be beyond needing anything, really, in this earthly realm. I mean, that was the impression that I used to have, and I still see it quite a lot. Yeah, and so I realized that, and I also realized that the language that I'd inherited, this language of good and bad and right and wrong and should and shouldn't and must and can't. There's a right way to do things, and there's a wrong way to do things. And I'm a good person if I do it this way, and I'm a bad person if I do it that way. And this is absolutely how my thinking went, right?
Yeah.
Even with all my spiritual practice.
So
And
there's
go on.
So there's this massive judgment dialogue running internally most of the time for many of us. And it's, reinforced with our schooling systems, because the model of how a school is, the structure, the hidden, invisible structure is blame, shame, punishment, and reward. So
Yeah.
that has a massive impact on society if you think about how long we've been in that structure and been training our children in that structure to think along those lines, right? But it's really also interesting, something you spoke about you only had 4 feeling words, and it's so true in the work I do. If I ask someone how do they feel, they usually give me a thought.
Yes.
Right?
That's
Or
so
they give me
true.
a judgment. They give me a thought or a judgment, but very rarely are they going to give me? And I also, there's times in my life when I'm not connecting to how I'm actually feeling.
Yeah.
I've not allowed myself to feel it, right? Because of whatever. It can be, just slowing down. It can be the fear of, if I let myself really feel this. And I think this is part of the reason why people shy away from doing the deeper inner work. They want to chase something else because the fear of feeling the thing that
Yeah.
they've been trying to avoid.
Yeah. And I don't even think it's necessarily the fear of feeling. Like, I'm not saying it's not that, but it's like, if I were to actually feel this, there's no saying where the bottom is. So it's not even this feeling right now, but if I
Oh,
let
yeah.
myself feel
Yes.
this feeling, then, oh my
Like a
God, I might just
seed.
get stuck. Yeah, that's right.
And never
Exactly.
come out, never could see the
And
light
never
of day
come out
again.
and
Mhm.
die almost.
Mm. Yeah.
So it's not even just this feeling. It's just being afraid of our emotions. Yeah. I think
Mm.
that's part of how we're trained though, isn't it? Like we're trained, children are very sensory. They're picking up in their field, through their field all the time, through
Mm.
their the signals that they're getting and whatever. They're very tuned in and they're one with that. But what we then teach them to do, and also they learn to do, is to disconnect from that and instead start identifying and start we take them to school, and what's valued in school is intellect and learning, and even in preschool now.
Yeah,
So
it's ruinous. It's completely ruinous of childhood and our creative natural ability. It's painful to watch. I had many experiences of that with my own two children, with I remember I used to drive and then I sold my car. So I was taking the bus with my young son, who had been one at the time, in his buggy. I kid you not, the minute we'd get on the bus, he would start screaming till we got off. At first, I couldn't figure it out. And then I realized he feels everything. He's feeling all the interference. He's
yeah,
feeling the
yeah,
energy of everyone. He cannot bear it, you know?
yeah,
So that's how sensitive we are. But being that sensitive is often punished. It's often ridiculed. It's often so many things. So over a lifetime, we learn to shut down our true capacity to feel. I just want to go back though, because you mentioned something about emotion and feeling. So there's the feeling in the body that's visceral, and then there are the emotions. Would you share a little bit about the distinction between those two?
Look, I don't treat them very differently. Obviously, if I'm feeling in my body, I can describe my stomach's clenched, I've got, butterflies. I can go with the emotion, like with the actual physical feeling of that. But really, I don't differentiate. I'm not too
Mm.
worried as long as we're tuning into the body. It's what I really care about. Yeah. And for me, it's not, I hear a lot of people saying, oh, it's important to feel. But the thing is they're like the signals on a dashboard. It's like, that's not the end point. Our feelings are always pointing us to what is it that really matters to us, not the strategy, but the quality of life, the quality of aliveness that we really care about. So, for example, if I'm sad, it might be because I'm really wanting belonging or companionship. And if I'm joyful, it might be because, my need for intimacy is really met, and fulfilled. So it's always, the feelings are always pointing us to a need, and the need takes us back to our life force. Yeah.
I love that. The feeling is pointing us to a need. And,
Yeah.
often I think the mind arise, our emotions can arise from a story, but even within the nugget of that story is also the need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, it's never about the washing up. Like, it's
Mhm.
never about the washing up. It's about
Mm,
what that means to us, that I want
mm,
to matter,
mm,
or that I'm wanting partnership, or
mm,
that I'm wanting, um, I really care about order, right?
mm,
It's never
mm.
about the washing up.
Shari, we live in a society today that uses a huge amount of labeling.
Mm,
One of the most prominent labels I'm hearing around me the last few years is this label of narcissism. You're so narcissistic, you're this, you're that. And sometimes, you know, I look at the way we push the label onto someone else because we don't want to sit with the deeper underlining needs of ourselves and the other. And I remember with my son's father once, well, we had this situation, we had a dynamic over years where he would call me up and he'd start the conversation with, you this, no, 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 and he'd go right in. And I would always, at the end of those conversations, feel destroyed. And I
mm,
recall this one day, where I just got, I'm going to take a big breath here. And instead of being destroyed and defending or attacking or any of that, I just went, it sounds like you really need XYZ. And just being able to hear behind and underneath the attacking words that he was saying completely shifted the dynamic forever. We have never communicated that way since.
oh,
He,
oh,
it's like just being able to hear what was really stressing him out and realizing it had nothing to do with me at all. It was just he didn't know how to express what he was afraid of. He had no idea how to share that with me. And all those years, I've been taking it personally and I'd been defending it or defending myself because I thought he was judging me. You think of all the wasted years in relationship where people are misunderstanding and misinterpreting what is really going on and the
yeah,
cost of that, right? Where that takes us, wasted years in relationship, wasted years of understanding and being able to build a better world with one another through that
yeah.
misunderstanding.
And also the impact on your son,
Hmm. Yeah,
the
yeah,
impact on you and your health and your
yeah.
emotional well-being, the
I mean, we've
impact.
done a pretty good job now in the years
Yeah,
since, but it
yeah,
took a long time, hey, to just see that one piece. And there's been a huge amount of work in other areas, but getting that felt like it just took it just dissolved so much.
it's amazing, isn't it, when we can just connect with the human that's here,
Mm,
in all our vulnerabilities.
mm.
Um,
I just see though that, it required a giving up the needing to defend. It required a giving up the needing to make him wrong, even for how he was coming at me.
yeah, yeah.
And
And the
I'm,
story, it
yeah.
takes and also, there's a fake energy. When I say fake, it's like it's a fake power. And it's kind of that comes from that kind of anger and indignation, you know.
Mm,
And I say it's fake. It's almost like adrenaline in its quality, and because it's like that hand on the hip that and it feels very self-righteous, and
mm,
and in that self-righteousness, it's like I'm higher than where he is. you know, like I get to win because
mm,
I'm obviously in the right here, and he, you know,
mm,
like you said, is a narcissist or this or
mm,
that. But it's even as I'm saying that, right, I'm feeling my heart. It's like
mm,
going, it's like it takes a huge amount of energy to
mm,
uphold that. And
mm,
also, it's so fragile, because this other human being is a human being. And as soon as I see them as a human being, that story starts to crumble. And so it's fragile. So, but it's not coming from a true place. Like one of the things that I talk about that I really get people to viscerally tune into is moving in life from their home zone. And by that, what I mean is it's like if you imagine 3 circles and like a target, and the 3 circles move out from our body. And the very core of who we are is our spirit, is our being. And I'm not talking religious, like even just we're alive, right? And if you look at our body after we're dead, we're not there anymore. What is that? That's who we are. That's our spirit. That's our being. That's in the center of our body. And then if you take the next layer out, that's our feelings. And our feelings are always pointing us back to that essence, to what it is that really, really brings us alive, makes life worthwhile, connects us as humans. And then the next layer out is the layer of thoughts, and also
mm,
how we're going to get our needs met, like what we like, how we want to do it. The stories that I tell myself, the moralistic judgment of what I think is right and wrong, the culture that we live in, the images that I have of myself, all of that's all in that. It's all the thoughts. It's all in that outer layer. But if I can consistently come back and orient in life, that outer layer is also what I think about you, right?
mm, mm,
So if I can keep orienting back, and also what you should do and what you shouldn't do, but if I
mm,
can keep orienting back to that core being and to those precious needs, which are all facets of that being, if I can keep orienting back to that and connecting with you from that place and seeing the same innocence in you, oh my God, now we've lit up something really, really precious. This is connection.
mm,
This is real connection. Um, so yeah, so in that place, those thoughts of who you are, they drop away. But on the other hand, if I am with someone who does things that consistently cross my boundaries, consistently, maybe this person isn't taking care of my child or our child in the way that, with the care that I feel is really important, then that doesn't mean I just let them get away with that. I have those conversations, but I have them from a different place. So not from a place of right and wrong, in which case, if I had it from right and wrong, they would just put up a shield and not listen. But instead, from what I care about and what really matters, and guessing what might be going on for them, it's a whole different place of openness that I
mm,
have that conversation from. And also, maybe this strategy doesn't work that I'm suggesting, but maybe there's some other way we can both get our needs met.
mm,
Um, so it's just such a beautiful place to orient in life from. And that's true power. Like that's our divine energy, our connection with our authentic power, not depending on whether they do something we want or don't.
You know, as you're speaking, I'm thinking about the fast pace that we live in, you know, the demands that are on us. Like if you're in a corporate context, you know, you're dealing with hundreds of people probably every hour. You know, how do you catch the important things and all the things that slip through? Or if you're in a really busy family with lots of children, you know, but what is what's the question? What is essential in being able to maintain clear communication?
Yeah. I guess the first thing is that as much as I can, I want to stay connected to my body, even in that chaos, even in that craziness, even in the 100 conversations in an hour. I want to stay connected to my body because my body is going to tell me when there's something I really need to pay attention to. And when I can just, you know, keep working out the books or whatever I'm doing. So those signals will come from my body. And so I want to stay connected to my body. And it can take longer to have a conversation, right? Or to stop the dinner and turn to our son and just be present because you can sense, ooh, there's something to pay attention to here, right? Or to simply say to them, look, with kids, it's a good idea to catch it in the moment rather than to try and retime it to later. But with an adult, it might be, look, I'm just trying to get dinner on the table. I can hear that this is something that really matters to you and I really want to hear it. Could we have this conversation after dinner, just you and I? You know, so you can do that with adults. But the thing is that if you don't pay attention, then you are going to be creating more work down the track.
I just want to say, you know, when I'm working with people on relationship, there's 4 relationship modes, right? There's aloof. You get the people who are just aloof. They avoid every kind of communication, connection, all of it. Because fundamentally they believe that connection is massively unsafe. It's a danger to their safety. And then you have people who play a more dominant and submissive dynamic where one person is submissive to the other who's more dominant, and that can switch. Right? And then you've got the people who are enmeshed in their way of being in relationship, where it's like they collapse into one another and one person makes up for the weaknesses of the other, and you know, all of this. And these are all energies that play in relationship. And the one that, you know, where we have the ability to stand in our sovereignty and our, you know, is that sovereign relationship where we can be in awareness. We can be in our full awareness, not giving over power or trying to take power, not trying to, you know, all of those, not trying to run and all of that. But this also plays a big part into how a communication is received and heard and listened to in that corporate context, right? That person's core orientation, as it were.
Absolutely.
You know, their unconscious orientation towards how they are being in relationship, not how someone else is, but how they are being in relationship, has a massive impact on whether or not they're going to even receive these.
Yeah, 1,000,000%, 1,000,000%. And you look at the leaders, even forget leaders, team members, leaders, anyone. And by the way, I believe we're all leaders. If we're not working hierarchical models, all of us are leaders when we're standing in that place of self-connection and receptivity and awareness. I've now forgotten what
Oh,
I was going to say.
there's something you said though just there that's beautiful. You know, you believe everyone is a leader, and I think that's the ripe juiciness of any organization, to be able to bring out the leadership qualities in everyone, no matter what role they're playing in an organization, to give them the agency and the autonomy, because then you unleash so much more productivity in people than you would if you try to dominate, basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Or control,
Absolutely.
you know? Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
What is I mean, I know that this has had a profound impact, right? The way you've trained people and facilitated people has had some massive impacts on organizations in Australia. Do you want to share a little bit that side of
Yeah.
your work?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I think we're not, I think, actually, I know that we're in a time of a lot of upheaval. And so what I'm hearing consistently from organizations, or, you know, owners of organizations, high-level management in organizations, is that people are feeling very emotionally vulnerable, that there might be anxiety, that there might be anxiety in their families, that there's that there's just a lot of that they're not that their resilience is lower. That so I'm hearing a lot of stuff like this, and if you haven't got the capacity to be present to your team members, then you've got some big challenges. So, for example, I worked recently with a very large ex-government organization, but huge organization with top-level management. And one of the things that came out in that was, I don't want to hear I'm uncomfortable. And they had maybe 25 people reporting to them. I'm uncomfortable hearing anything personal from someone in my team. Now, how, I'm hoping that some of that shifted through that training that they did. But how, if there are major things going on for someone who's working for you, how willing do you think that those people are going to be to talk about those challenges? Like, I'm not talking about please solve them, but to actually have an open conversation of saying, this is what's going on. I'm caring for my mum right now. I'm, just having real conversations. That's not going to happen. And it was really, really beautiful, actually. At the end of all of that, the leader of the whole group said to me, I'm shocked by how little I know about communication. I thought I was an amazing communicator, but after having done this, I realized, oh my gosh, I'm just, there's so much more for me to know. But what he was also pointing to is something else that's really important, is that we've come from hierarchical models of business. In fact, we've come from hierarchical models of life for the last 3,000 to 8,000 years. And even something like giving feedback. It's like, if I'm the manager and I give feedback to you, then I'm speaking from a position of authority. I get to judge whether you're measuring up in your job, what you need to be doing differently, and so on. One of the things that instead, so how do we navigate without having this coming from a place of power with the people that we're talking to, because that's how we're actually going to get that real engagement, is through that power with. And that was also one of the things that he was saying to me is, oh my gosh, I can see that when I speak from my center, from my power, from what I'm seeing, from my observations, and I'm curious, and I share concerns or share, you know, what's going on. And I'm also at the same time curious about what's going on for you. How do you see this? Then all of a sudden, we now are able to meet each other, not from the protection of, you know, power over, but in hierarchical power, but instead we're working out solutions together. And that person that I'm working with, they're going to have information as well. You know, there's another major organization that I've just been working with, privately owned, and they have a partnership of 4 people. And again, each person is going to be bringing information differently. And it's so important to be able to come together and have those conversations and actually really hear each other, not from judgments or hierarchy, but because even within partnerships, there's hierarchies. So it can activate a whole organization. There was another organization, which was a care organization. So they sent people into aged care, into people's homes and so on. And this manager was really, really struggling. And she said to me, but this whole idea of moving beyond right and wrong, there is right and wrong. There's right and wrong. There has to be right and wrong. And as we talked about it, she had, and I said, well, does that serve you? You know, does it really serve you to be coming from this place of right and wrong? Because who gets to be right and who gets to be wrong? And as it went on, she then started sharing how she wants to create an environment of safety for her people, because quite often they have to have very important conversations about safety of clients, about things, performance things or whatever. She said, but at the moment, when I set an appointment for someone to come in and have a conversation with me, they're afraid. She said, I don't want them to be afraid. And so,
Wow.
what
I
was
mean,
that?
I'm just thinking, how do you create safety if you have to have right and wrong? You can't
Yeah,
have safety and have
you
judgment at
can't.
the same time.
Exactly. You can't have safety. And so we even looked at some of the words that they were using. So, for example, assessment. I've forgotten some of the words now, but the whole an inquiry. I can't remember. There were really classic words that they were using to describe the processes and the judgments about, you know,
Makes my
and
whole being recoil.
these
Horrible
words
feeling.
were all embedded within their systemic systems that they were working within. And so when we started having conversations about that, she started seeing it. Then she started going, oh my God, like we've got to change our whole language, so that we're not bringing fear into it. And of course, safety matters for clients, for clients at home, as well as the people who are coming in.
But everybody is
So
going to measure that differently. This is the thing. There's no one size fits all safety. You know, if you go into one person's home, the way that they perceive safety, their needs around safety are going to be completely different to the
yes,
next person. It's
yeah,
how do you
yeah,
even begin?
and there are certain systems that they need to put in place in order to protect them, like protection for everyone. So, and that's fine. But then But then sometimes people are under time constraints. How do they, but they're not having, some of those conversations are important conversations to have. So, so how do we move beyond this whole right and wrong? And yeah, it's really shifting this, all of our relationships within organizations. But I'll tell you something, younger people are not putting up with the hierarchical structures that our generation, my generation, your generation put up with. We just took it for granted there's hierarchical, and the younger people, they're just going, I'm leaving. It's like, I don't care. I don't know if the world's going to stay here, like.
I mean, I
I'm
have
not
a
putting
pretty
up
low
with it.
tolerance for that myself. I'm just,
Yeah.
just nope. I was listening to there's an entrepreneur in the UK called Simon Squid who is all about empowering people to start their own businesses. And one of the things I really love listening to in his he has a 2-hour YouTube talk on setting up a business, and he talks about equity, giving everybody who works in the business equity, giving them a stake in the business. And I really love that model because it allows people to work as a team to build something that's for them, not for the person at the top or the founder or the whatever. And I think really see that being the future of business. There's this massive opportunity to create businesses in the future that are designed entirely differently, but it requires one that we really own our gifts and talents and our inclinations, and two, that we approach things completely anew rather than relying on how it's normally done, and I see that beginning to happen. And with some courage and bravery, we could completely redesign education, health, finance, you name it. And also there are still challenges, obviously, but I think the place I see most people have challenge is in their family, to be honest, because there's this area in professionalism that there's almost like a code where people hide it all. And I see the impact of that on productivity. Because when I used to take my team to Bank of New York and people had the chance to just say, I haven't slept all night, I have a new baby, or, I've had this argument with my boss, it dropped the weight off of them. And then they can go back to their day feeling much more focused and productive. If we're not giving people the space for that, then, they carry it. They really do. And it slows them down. It restricts their energy, their life force in terms of what they're even willing to give. It builds up resentments, all sorts. But in family dynamics, it's almost like all bets are off. It's almost like, I don't even know how to describe it, but this is the place where I see people in the most pain because there's the most separation. There's, when we're estranged from the people who matter to us, who we care about, we've made them wrong or ourselves wrong and them right. It's, it has a very lasting impact. I guess my question is, what are the differences and the nuances you see in those areas? And then, what are some of the tools people can use to begin to unravel that that level of discord? What can they do to dissolve that level of discord?
Yeah. I think, one of the things again, like, firstly, if we build up enemy images, particularly with people that we love. So when I say enemy images, like the areas that we don't like about them and that we'd really like to change. And I think it's important to be able to separate the who the person is from what they're doing. So
Wouldn't
so
it
like
be
I can
though?
have,
Don't don't we always think that what the person does is who they are? Do those two things aren't they those two things quite automatic in
oh
the
my
head?
God, I hope not. I hope not. I hope not. I mean, I think because so often what we're trying to do is we're trying to get this person to change, to be someone different to who they are. But there's an enormous power again that comes when I actually just simply accept, actually, it doesn't matter how many times I talk to them, they're going to, like, more than likely, they're going to keep getting undressed at night and dropping their clothes on the ground where they get undressed. Because I've spoken to them now so many times, right? But that's not who they are. And so the more that I can stay connected with who they actually are and talk about the thing and what that means to me, but also look at there's infinite strategies for the thing. So, for example, we might get separate bedrooms. We might section the room off into half, and they can have their half messy and my half is pristine. And I don't know, like there's just infinite, or maybe I just start picking up his clothes, or her clothes. So yeah, not confusing the two is,
Mm,
I think, really important, so that we're not creating those enemy images.
mm,
And the other thing is like I'm me, and I'm magnificent, right? Like the same for you. You're you and you're magnificent. Like, I don't mean that in an egoic way. I just mean we are a product of creation, like the same as any plant, or, it's like we are magnificent. And so, I don't know, for me, it's about not forgetting that. Keep relating to this human being. And we're all magnificent in our uniqueness, right? Like
mm,
my mother, I grew up with my mother telling me that I should be more like her. Now, she's an extreme introvert, like almost hermit, extreme
wow.
introvert.
Okay.
And, but I should be more like her. I don't think so. I don't think that's ever going to work, right? But for a lot of years, I thought that there was something wrong with me because I wasn't like her,
Mm,
right?
mm,
But
mm,
now I'm celebrating, and I encourage my clients to celebrate, the people who come through our programs. I'm really, it's like something happens within our being when we can celebrate, genuinely celebrate both who we are. That's kind of like first step, but also celebrate that I did this. Because of what I did, then one of my clients was able to, I had a beautiful story the other day where a client met with her doctor the first up, and she'd known that her doctor's mum had just died not long, few weeks
mm,
before, and she was a little bit, the doctor was a bit fragile. And she just put her hand on her arm and just met her and just said, I'm just really happy to listen. I just want to listen. And the
mm,
doctor just cried and shared some things. And what Hillary, this beautiful soul, said to me was, Shari, it was because of you, because I had been listened to in that way,
mm, mm.
that I was able to pass that on to her, that I was
But that's
able to be.
extraordinary that she was able to receive it even.
I know. Isn't that just so beautiful? But it's
Mm.
like when I can actually go, because I noticed I let it sort of run off like Teflon. It was like, oh, that's so nice that you did that, right? But now I'm starting to go, actually, Yeah, that was because of what I did. And I can feel it. It's like beyond cellular. It's like it grows my capacity as a being to be able to, of what I'm capable of.
Mm,
It's like,
mm,
it's just amazing, right? So we have to be able to celebrate ourselves and
mm,
not ask other humans to be different to who they are.
mm,
Like,
There's been
yes,
a
they can
real,
do something different, but not be someone different.
yeah, yes,
Otherwise,
okay,
I'm just
yeah.
moving in constant judgment of them.
Yeah, there's been a real receiving. Like, I mean, firstly, just for that doctor to allow the mask, she didn't feel that she needed to keep the professional mask on. And what a freedom that is, right? What a massive freedom to receive it and to receive that care and that space. And also just the freedom of, I know for myself in the role of facilitating groups, just allowing myself to just be who I am and not have to have a certain way that I must be in order to match some unknown expectation, which just inhibits all of the connection. And, yeah, that has been a real freedom for me in my approach to working with people, in just that level of acceptance of self that happens when we no longer have to judge ourselves
Yes,
for, unspoken assumptions and measurements that aren't even ours. They're inherited, you know, bullshit
yeah,
from whoever made that up.
exactly. Exactly. And sure as anything, there will be people who do not want to work with me. Like,
Mm, mm,
hooray, right? Hooray.
yeah, yeah,
And there are other people, so many people that just go like, oh my God, Shari, like,
yeah,
thank you, thank you, thank you. And if
yeah,
I tried to twist and contort myself to be somebody other, and I
mm,
look at you and I just feel nothing but this love for this being that
mm,
you are, right?
mm,
And the uniqueness of what you bring on the planet. Like,
mm,
even having these conversations, having these podcasts, the work you do with your clients, like,
mm,
they couldn't receive that from anybody else in the way that they can receive that from you. Like, how
mm.
extraordinary is that?
Yeah, we each have that for one another. This is the thing. And, we've systematized our society so much that we don't allow for the uniqueness of the essence of another human being to touch us in a way that, because we've created, I mean, these structures and systems that erode that and punish it. And I think this is the big point that arises, is that people who are very repulsed by this idea are usually in so much fear because they want to be able to control. They fear for their authority, they fear for their power. And so they're dedicated to making sure that they, you know, continue to project that onto the world around them. And
Yeah.
in the system of doing business that they perpetuate, and it's so unnecessary. It's a false illusion, but they do such a great job of upholding the false illusion that they've managed to convince millions of people to that that's the only way it could be, that's the only thing that's possible. And I think there's an army of hearts, I like to say, an army of hearts around the world who are starting to go, actually no, and they're starting to stand up and push back and hold it and call it out. And and there's so much possibility in what's happening, but it's also massively disruptive because society, as we've lived it up till now, is changing so fast. Yeah. Mm,
Yeah, it's so true. And I agree with you that this is changing. And I think AI is only going to really make it even more so, make that authenticity of who we are. And by the way, authenticity isn't authenticity is like having the courage to be myself, like
Mm,
to be the uniqueness that I am, not,
mm,
like even
mm,
authenticity gets this word as though somehow, now I have to be authentic, but it's still in a box. It's like, but I think the AI is just, it's
mm,
just making a hunger for real,
mm,
even
mm.
more. And by the way, AI can connect at the mind level. It's
Yeah, it
but not
can't go
heart
to
level.
intuition or heart
No,
or any of that. Yeah,
exactly.
that's so true.
Those things that make us human, right?
Mm, mm. And
Yeah.
also because we're energy beings, we feel it. We can feel it. I've read the books that are AI produced, and there's a completely different quality. There's a feeling of deadness to it, versus a live book that someone's poured their wisdom into. It's a whole nother experience altogether. So, it's that difference between obviously using the mind as a servant, use AI as a servant, great, but it's in no way the master. And, if we're trying to make it be that in some way, shape, or form, or submitting to that, then, it's an indication of the inner work that we're being invited to do.
And
Um,
actually, the other thing too about that is within organizations, again, I think it's even more important that we have humans that are able to speak up and
Mm.
share, not from a right, wrong place, but from a genuine heart place
this is
around
very
concern.
tricky. Yeah. Now this is tricky. I remember my son being in school, and they would say, "Oh, this is a safe space. You can express yourself."
Yeah.
But actually, every time a child did, they'd end up in the headmaster's office.
Oh, oof, how much safety is there? Jeez.
None, because
Wow.
there's measurement and judgment and expectation, and it's the whole thing.
Mm.
So just that whole part of being able to speak up.
Yeah.
My speaking up was to remove my son from the school. That's the way I spoke up,
Yeah.
right? But not everybody is prepared to do that because they have their own pressure,
Right.
etc.
I was just
But
going to say
this,
that
yeah,
the thing is, though, there's a way to speak up and there's a way to speak up. When we speak from our heart rather than from right and wrong, when I say our heart, from what we care about, from that central place of power within us, not from a place of you shouldn't or you are wrong or look what you're doing, but instead, when I remember, I think this is a really important part of that speaking up to make sure that the systems and structures that we're putting in place. I mean, we just had just today it came out 1,400 people, and in Australia that's a lot, in from Telstra, our phone telecommunications company, are being retrenched, and a lot of it is because of AI taking roles and taking their jobs, and uh, and what really matters is what happens to those older people who can't navigate computer systems that actually have to ring and speak to a human being. What happens? What happens to someone whose bill or invoice isn't correct, and they keep going the numbers, and it keeps cycling them around, and it's these are the conversations that we need to protect our humanity within these changes that are happening, and we have to have a language to speak up from.
yes. Now this is really important because actually, what tends to happen from my observation is that we don't speak up, we don't speak up, we don't speak up, and then there's just hysteria.
Yeah.
There's just anger. There's just the huge emotionality and the frustration, and and this happen. It's in everything. That the ripping out of people's humanity to systematize a thing happens across education, medical, finance, you name it. I mean, that telecom system that you're speaking of, I mean, yeah, I totally relate. Even someone who isn't older can get frustrated with that, but more
Absolutely.
so when you're in your 70s, 80s, 90s, your ability to cope with it, depending on the support you have around you, is massively impacted.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's huge. I mean, anyway, we can
So,
keep,
so
we
what
can,
what I what I want to ask you is, when you say speak up, you're not talking about, because, to speak from your inner being, to speak from your feeling, could in someone's imagination look like an emotional hysteria and upset and anger, and yeah, and we know that that
that
doesn't penetrate, it just
doesn't
creates
work.
more resistance.
It
What
does.
do
It
you
creates guilt.
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm, mm.
it creates even harder for people to hear. So how do you speak up from that inner center in that
Yeah.
way? Yeah, in
Firstly,
time for it to be
yeah.
heard, because
Yeah.
it does seem like we live in a system that won't hear anything.
Yeah. There's a beautiful example of this that I'm so grateful for. There is a woman who is an ombuds within a major hospital. And when COVID came in, she had these skills, so she was fairly proficient in these skills and in self-connection and knowing what matters, paying attention to her body and speaking from this clarity. And so they were coming in and set things that if you weren't vaccinated as a nurse or a doctor, you were going to lose your job. And that was government legislation. And so they, as part of that, and this isn't about the right and wrong of it. This is just what
It's hard to
happened.
hold down. I can feel my anger, even just the insanity of these people making these decisions. But hey,
A lot of long-term impacts, but for so many anyway. But what happened was there was a lot of anger within the hospital. So, for example, they were having events like for example, one of the anaesthetists had a nurse in the operating theatre with them, and when the nurse went to hand something to the anaesthetist screamed at her, saying, "Get your filthy effing contaminated hands off my equipment," just like, and this wasn't a one-off. This is the sorts of um there was a lot of fear and a lot of upset and so on, and so this was going on at the same time. They were trying to get the details of who is vaccinated, who isn't vaccinated, because they didn't know who's going to be able to keep their jobs and who's going to be losing their jobs. And so then they came up with, okay, so we are telling them they have to and by the way, the nursing profession was one of the highest levels in the early stages of people not vaccinating, because they did the research into it and came up, they weren't making this from any ad hoc thing. They were really clear of, they did not, a lot of nurses did not want to get vaccinated because of the information they saw. And the managers were being told, you just have to tell them, hand in your certificate. If you don't hand in your certificate, go and get educated by your doctor, your local doctor, and they will educate you on how safe this is, and then bring back your certificate so that you can continue in your job. That was how they were going to approach it.
wow.
And there's so much condescension in that. There's so much assumption that the person isn't educated, that the doctor knows that they're going to go and see, that they have to defer to the right, that there's no personal power in it, so on. Anyway, they were coming down really, really hard, and this person was in the top management in these high level management meetings, and they're starting to go, we just have, just this whole definitive thing. And she just spoke up, and
I think it's called.
well, she just spoke up and she just said, well, they had a job to get done as well. Like, there's needs on both perspectives. And at that top level management side, there's government regulations. Like, they can't just ignore government regulations when governments are funding their hospitals. So I can also understand they then just went into dehumanizing mode and just like, like laying down the law. And then she actually, when she's hearing all of this, she actually stood up and spoke from her heart, saying, what I see that this hospital has always stood for is a unity of everybody who works here and a mutual respect and care. And so what I would like to do is propose that I come up with an approach where we can have these conversations in a respectful and mutually connective way. And I'll have that done for you by such and such a date. How about that? And everyone went like, there was like this recognition of, oh my God, yes, this matters here. This is what we are about. And this relief that someone not only stood up and said, this is wrong, this is bad, this isn't what should happen, but stood up and spoke to what she cared about, and what the people in the other hospital positions cared about, and spoke to that from her heart, and also made a clear request to help them to move forward. And they all went, yeah. So she did that. That was part of the education. And not only that, not only was there this high respect that came through, they didn't have choice in whether they told their staff to be vaccinated, because that was the legislation, but they could have choice about how they did it. And the other thing is that ombuds was connected to a whole network of ombuds around the world. And when they had a Zoom connection call, she'd shared this celebration of what she'd done. And they all went, oh my God, we're facing the same problems. Can you share that leaflet, that pamphlet with us? And so she did. And so then that went around the world. Like, that's one person.
Yeah,
And an
massive. Yeah.
enormous
What I see through what you've just shared is the power of investing in having these skills before you hit the crisis point. Because if you wait, and crisis comes to us all at different moments in different ways in life, in different contexts, but having these skills already and having a place devoted to practicing it is so important, because otherwise you're in the firing line, you've got nothing to go with except the default, because the brain very quickly goes to freeze, fight, flee. It's just, our human nature, it's the way the brain functions. So having this early, and then, as you said, she was already trained, she was already practiced, and she was already skilled, and she had a global impact. We have all of those people who stood their ground on those matters to thank for the fact that, we were able to get past that crazy time and that total, takeover, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you're saying. It's so true. I mean, I see that over and over. Or there's in a family crisis, or there's, someone, manager who's working in a certain way at work that is unacceptable, like,
Yeah.
and they've
But
got the skill.
here's the great thing about this, though, that anybody listening, if you're in an organization or a family who don't have the skills, there are trained NVC facilitators all over the world.
Yeah.
And but you in particular have a way of facilitating it that is beyond just the standard NVC approach. You've integrated this with the visceral feelings. You've integrated it intuitively. You've integrated it in a way that, not everybody does, because they just stick to the formula. And that's can be effective, but it's nowhere as closely impactful as what your approach is. Yeah.
No, I'd agree with that. And if I see a lot of people using it as a formula, as a method, and it's better than what we might have had before. So, but I think there's such an intelligence that we access when we really match it with that body awareness, and that takes practice, but it doesn't take long. I've got people who, because we've got a 2-day training, and then we've got a 6-month training, and by the end of the 6 months, like, I'm blown away by how integrated they are. It's extraordinary in 6 months what you can do.
I think my understanding of MVC is there can be particular ways to language things. And what I like about your approach is that you've kind of been able to help people dissolve the need for a particular type of language and just be more authentically themselves in their communication. So there's that aspect to it as well.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you for recognizing that. Yeah.
Oh, Shari, thank you for this conversation and for sharing your gift and, your dedication and your devotion over the years with us, with the people that you serve, and the people who go on to, stay connected to what really matters to us as human beings. That's really going to be more and more important as things continue to shift and change rapidly around the
I think
planet.
so.
Yeah.
If we're not grounded in ourselves, where are we grounded? We're grounded in all the thoughts and judgments and programming, but if we're not grounded in our own unique life energy that moves moment to moment to moment to moment, and what that is, and what that's bringing us home to, where are we grounded?
Yeah,
So,
well, you miss all the magic of life, in that there's so much more available to us when we're actually receiving fully. Yeah.
yeah, so true.
How can
Thank you
people
for what
reach
you're
you?
doing, all you're doing in your ripples of relationship, and all the
Mm,
support that you bring to so many,
mm,
business owners, and
mm,
all that you're working with. I know,
mm.
we're holding
I
the
feel
same intentions.
blessed to have, stuck with it, because it's not always been clear over the years, but the heart is always pulling us to what
Yeah.
matters, what
It is.
matters the most. It's always speaking. So there's such a level of acknowledgement for actually, gosh, I get to do this. I get to do what matters most to me and not be trying to live a life that doesn't fulfill me, Yeah.
Yeah.
How can people reach you, Shari?
If you go to communicationgroup.com.au, you can see me there, and I'm also on all the social medias and so on as well. So you can find me as Shari Elle. You can find me as Shari Elle there.
Lovely.
Yeah.
I'll pop the link in the show notes so people can find you. And yeah, thanks so much for coming on.
Been a joy. Thank you for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode, please share it and subscribe to the podcast. If you would love to reach out to my guest or myself, visit the show notes where you'll find all our contact information. Thank you so much for listening.